Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Think vlogging series, where we discuss current issues and I try to help people think a little bit deeper about the ramifications, the implications, and how you should approach certain things that are being proposed or discussed in society as a whole. I'd like to continue in episode 2 on the previous episode. It has to do with bioethics. I do promise in the future I will be discussing a wider selection of topics. However, what's current at the moment is this discussion on abortion that some extremists in Malta, and they are extremists because to kill an unborn baby and call it choice or a right is of course an extremely extreme position to take. And so this extremist view taken by certain people who want to be referred to as pro-choicers, what kind of a feminist would actually agree that killing her own child is the epitome of women's rights? So let's look at the different discussions being, or the propositions being made, and how you can counter-argue these. Well, first of all, they mention the word choice. The reason why they use the word choice is because they don't want you to focus on what the topic really is. If they can manage this and they control the narrative, then they're winning. And so because they know they can't argue on the issue of abortion and science, they want to divert your attention towards looking at the whole issue, which of course is very severe and complicated, simply from a point of view of choice or women's rights. Now, instinctively, you know that there's something very wrong with this, but you may not be able to articulate exactly what. So let's look at this. Well, choice, basically, when you say you're in favor of a choice, who can be against someone who's in favor of a choice? I mean, choice is a very noble thing to have, is it not? We are all about choices in the world, are we not? And so when you introduce the element of choice, which is what we call semantics, changing the meaning of things basically by using different words, you're calling abortion, which is the brutal killing and willful killing of an innocent unborn child within the mother's womb, you're calling it basically just simply a choice, as if you're going out to choose between decaf or a regular coffee or vanilla or chocolate ice cream. Those are the choices we normally refer to when we use the word choice. But certainly there's something very wrong when you say that killing an innocent individual who is not part of its mother's body, it has its own DNA, its own, of course, existence. It only lives within the womb as it grows and is being nourished. It is not part of the woman's body. When you kill that individual, you negate that individual's choice. Apart from the obscenity that how can you ever justify killing as a right? I mean, if it was self-defense, somebody came into your house and it was an aggressor, possibly armed, then of course it would be justified to kill that opposing person in defense of you or your family. But here we're talking about an innocent child. And because they know that they can't argue successfully based upon the arguments I'm presenting, they will try to mesmerize the media and you by using the words choice as if they are better than you because they're in favor of choice. Yet at the same time, they are purposely denying the discussion going towards the unborn child and of course the woman who suffers many years after an abortion. I remember talking a few years ago to a woman who phoned me. She was 64 at the time. This is 15 years ago. And she told me when we first came on the scene as a pro-life movement, how she, every Christmas time, and we're close to Christmas, and every Christmas she goes through a depression. And she's never managed to really find any peace in her life because when she was 15, she went and had an abortion because her parents didn't want her to have that child. Until today at 64, now she's probably in her 70s towards her 80s, every Christmas, because the abortion happened during the Christmas week, she cannot enjoy her Christmas. She's filled with regret and silent suffering. And so how can that be a woman's right? And what if the fetus, because they'll call it a fetus, which by the way, a fetus simply means in Latin, little child, they'll tell you that it's just a fetus, it's not a baby. Something quite wrong there, there's something very wrong there, isn't there? So they try to dehumanize the unborn child because they know that the science is against them. All science and all embryology books tell you that life begins at conception. that within the moment of conception, within 20 hours of this fusion, there is distinct individual DNA, taking chromosomes from both the mother and the father and forming one individual who is separate from the mother, only connected through an umbilical cord to get nourishment and, of course, to be able to grow safely within its mother's womb. And so, because they know they'll lose on these arguments, they'll then introduce the idea that it's just an embryo. They'll tell you it's just a clump of cells. Well, I'm sorry, but they are individual cells. That is a person with potential, not a potential person. So the idea that it is just a clump of cells is meant, again, to dehumanize science and facts so that you believe that it's nothing but just a tumor. And who wants a tumor in their body? And so for that reason, they will use arguments which degrade the unborn child to get you to believe them and then to carry on with this whole idea that we're righteous because we're in favor of choice, without actually talking about what the choice implies for the unborn child, and of course for the mother after the choice, who only then realizes what she's done by her own decision to suffer then a life of suffering. Now, because they cannot argue on the science, they'll come up with different ways of justifying choice and rights. They will say, for example, that the child, that abortion is justified as a right and a choice if that child threatens the mother's life. How do you counter this? Ask them, give me one example when a baby is so aggressive, so dangerous that it's going to kill its mother, that you have to kill it before it kills its mother. And they will not be able to answer you. And the reason for that is because there are no such cases. There are cases which are catered for in Malta, such as, for example, ectopic pregnancy, when the pregnancy the fertilized embryo does not continue all the way down to the womb, but stops somewhere in the fallopian tubes and grows in one of the fallopian tubes, and as it grows, if it continues to grow, it will rupture the tube and the mother will bleed to death. In those cases, we use the double effect in Malta, where the doctor will go in and take out the tube with the baby still in it, the intention being to save the baby's life and the mother's life, but as a consequence the child does die. In those cases, not even the church, because they'll tell you it's just a religious argument, not even the church will intervene or impose in any way, because they like to throw this around that the church imposes. Well, the church has no position on that. They leave that entirely up to the science and, of course, up to the choice of the mother. If she wants to, for example, go ahead with chemotherapy, if she's got cancer and she's pregnant. They do not demand on the mother that she does not, that she dies as a result of not taking treatment to protect the unborn child, but that's a fallacy which they will perpetrate. So these are the ways you argue these pro-abortion arguments. Keep in mind that they do not want you to do a couple of things, and you must do this. They don't want you to mention that they are pro-abortion. So keep on using the word pro-abortion and ignore the word pro-choice. They want to control the narrative. When they control the narrative, people start to think like them. And you've got to fight this. Because they know they can't win on all the science, they must use deceitful semantic language. That's why they use the words such as rights, because who can be against a woman's right? And of course, you'd be right in saying that's wrong, because it cannot be a right if it negates the right of another individual. And science backs up that it's an individual. Well, okay, let's say it is your right as a woman to kill that unborn child. And they go, no, it's not an unborn child, it's a fetus. That little child then, because the Latin is for fetus means little child. We'll argue that, but eventually I'll go, well, if that's the case, what if that unborn child happens to be female? Does she not have a right to life? And over there you've stopped them because they cannot argue. Well, quite simply, the pro-abortion argument is pitted with holes. Each time that you actually challenge it using these arguments, their argument falls, and they know it does, and that's why they depend desperately on you believing that it's just a right without thinking about it, or just a woman's right or a choice without actually deeply thinking about what they're saying, because in that way they'll win you over. You could actually be staunchly pro-life, that you believe that life begins at conception and that abortion is the killing of an unborn child. But with these arguments, they can convince even you. So you've got to arm yourselves with replies and stand firm and assertively, and don't worry about being called out, because they will, when they fail in all their arguments because you argue back like this, they will then resort to insults and attacks. And when that happens, okay, be kind, Be charitable, do not insult them back, be respectful, just continue to maintain your pro-life position backed up with these solid arguments. Now remember, they'll even use the certain arguments like the child is not a child, and so it's okay to kill the child. And notice I'm always using the word child, not fetus, okay? The child, if it cannot live on its own. They will say that unless it's independent, then it's a foreign body. It's like a tumor. Well, ask them this. If you believe that we can kill a child because it's still dependent on its mother, then at what age after it's born is it not dependent on its mother or father or its parents? Because a child, as far as I know, even at 3, 4, 6, 10 years old, for something needs its mother or father. So it needs its parents. And as a result, of course, that argument dies because they try to kill the unborn child by saying that it's not an unborn child until it can live on its own. So what they're trying to say is that unless it implants within the womb and it is able to live outside the womb, and afterwards it's allowed to live outside the womb, that it's not a child. Well, based upon what science exactly does the human being lose its humanity at some stage of development or ability to do something? If that was the case and we apply that, then we'd have, of course, and it is of course the natural outcome of all of this, would be legitimizing euthanasia. When people cannot do certain things, they become a burden on society, and therefore they're victims or candidates, as they would call them, for euthanasia. So the profound arguments being used, of course, are the same ones. They don't change. They're always the same ones, and you always tackle them in these same ways. What would help you is to know these facts, but also to do your own research about human development. If you're not into reading, then on YouTube there are many channels out there, many videos that will help you think a little bit deeper and see the whole picture. So don't be fooled. Think for yourself. Be a human being who has their own thinking capacity, who doesn't just soak up like a sponge all their semantics and all their lovely, fluffy, flowery language, that they're all in favor of just choice and women's rights. Because they're not. They're in favor of the killing of the unborn child through abortion, and you remind them always, and they're also in favor of taking away the rights of another human being so that they can have their own rights, apparently. I'd like to wish you all a very blessed Christmas. Please be safe, obviously. Don't go out and drink. There's no need to have fun by getting absolutely hammered and drunk. And of course, be close to the loved ones, especially those who have no one to talk to this Christmas. And we all know someone. People who are lonely or even depressed over the Christmas period tend to feel a lot more depressed and a lot more lonely. So what greater act of charity, what greater gift can you give someone than the gift of love this Christmas? So I'll see you after the Christmas period with episode 3 of Think. Please share this video, subscribe to my channel, and let's inform people and empower people with the ability to think for themselves in this very difficult, confusing age that we live in. Thank you.